Hello, web programming students. Welcome to the live demo. There'll be no edits. So this is going to be unedited, unfiltered. So let's get started. So just to show you what I'm going to make in CodePen, here's a mock-up of my site for Empire Strikes Back. Here's the phone portrait view. Here is a iPad portrait view. And here is a landscape view. Get the idea. And here's a desktop view. So in the desktop, it's going to be slightly different. They're going to be side by side, this trailer video piece and this link to buy tickets. It's not actually going to be a ticket link. This movie came out 40 years ago. And then the cast and the crew sections here are side by side. And then here's the footer. And then if you were to shrink this down, then it gets progressively smaller and there's a little bit of a different way the links are set up, and then way back down to the phone looks different altogether. These are stacked now, and these are also stacked. And that's what we're going to make in CodePen. So if we go back to, here's the example in CodePen. So we're going to rebuild this in a fresh CodePen. So when you go to codepen.io, you can do create pen projects collection once you set up an account. So we're going to create a pen. And they start out with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So we're not going to need JavaScript. So I'm going to just move this over, take this boundary here and move it over so it's out of the way. And then this will give me room to make HTML and CSS. It's also a good idea to change this title. So let's change this title. Let's call this live demo of project 2. And then once we get started, we'll start with a blank slate. Basically, here's a preview pane of what you'll be making our code in here and here, our HTML and CSS. So the nice thing is they take care of all the hosting for you kind of thing. And you can just put code here and test out to see what it looks like. So what we're going to do is start with the head, of course. You don't have to actually type in HTML tag here. They take care of that for you. So we will start with our head, of course, and then our body always follows that. And then we start filling some things in. We always want a title. So that goes here. Let's call this Empire Strikes Back. Whoops. Close this title tag. And then the next thing we can do is we want to make this responsive. So the next thing we should do is meta viewport, or meta name equals viewport. And then content equals width equals device dash width and comma initial scale equal 1.0. So this line of code makes this code responsive. All of this here. And so far, there's nothing here yet. We haven't put anything in the body. All the body stuff will show up here. Now, for my code, for my mockups, I'm using Squadda 1, and also I'm using Roboto for this text here. So we can go to Google Fonts. So I got Google Fonts open right here. And I want Roboto, so I'll go over here select the style. I'll just get the regular style here. And then you will see on the right your selected family here, and they'll give you the HTML that you need and the CSS that you need. But I need to add one more font to this, of course. I need Squad 01. Here it is. It's only have one style, so just select this style. And your code updates so that you have both of these font files in there. And so I want to just copy this part here, this link, copy, and then go back to, whoops, go back to CodePen, and then that gets dropped into the head right here. And so now I'll have fonts to use in the body. So that's all I need for my head at the moment. It's a good idea to save. So on a regular basis, so make sure you save. There we go. I'll get this out of the way. And we've enabled autosave by itself, so that's good. So now we need to start adding body tags. And the way you want to think about mobile first is what you can do if you want to do this to see the mobile first part in action. You can go to change view. And then when we change view, we can go to full page view. And right now there's not anything, but in order to go see it in a mobile view, we can go to inspect for using Chrome. And then we can select this icon here, toggle device toolbar. It starts out like this, but if you click this one, then you can pick different phone sizes or different mobile devices. So we can do iPhone 6, 7, 8, and then this is what your code will look like. And this is what I have here in my finished product. So we can change this here in Chrome to be certain devices. So iPad Pro, say, looks like this. iPad looks like this. And then we can switch it to responsive and then change these numbers to whatever we want. And then we can change the orientation like so, using this button here. And so if you want to see this in a mobile first basis all the time, you can use the inspector and use this responsive here. So we could do that here if we like. Switch back to editor view so we can add some tags. Now this is really tiny, it's hard for you to see. But I would go back to and close inspector and then just check in once in a while to make sure that your code is showing up the way you want it for your mobile first view. So I'm going to close this JavaScript panel. See if I can close this perfectly. Well, it's not letting me. Anyway. All right, so let's add some HTML to this. So my mock-up here, I've got some text here, more text here. This is the navigation. So I'm going to make this nav with an unordered list with 4 list items. And then I have a YouTube embed here, and then this picture with some text over it, text with a clickable link of text. This picture will be a background image of a div, and I'll get into this as we go set up the HTML. And then here's a bit of HTML again, text, and then bullet list. That's an unordered list. And here's another unordered list. And then here's my footer with more text, more links, even though you can't really see them as links, and then a list of a line of copyright. So how we divide these into divs, let's see, what did I do for this here? I made one div be the entire container for everything. And then I split them up. Here's a nav. This is an iframe. Actually, I put these two into divs because eventually they're going to be side by side. So we're going to use Flexbox for this. So I put that into a separate div, and then these two in a separate div, and then have in this main div here two child divs for the Flexbox thing. Same thing for here. So you'll see this when I go to put it in right here. So first, div class, we'll call it container. And I will add a little note to myself that this is the end of container div. And so everything is going to flow from this. The next piece, we'll use, let's see, we could put this in a header, but I chose not to. And so I will just use an H1, sorry, to make the Empire Strikes Back. Here it is showing up here. We're going to add some style to this, of course. Save this. And then the next thing I have is an H2, which says coming to theaters on May 21, 1980. H2. The next thing I have is a nav. I had that unordered list. And then here's unordered list. And then I have 4 list items. I'll put this part in first. I'll just copy and paste because I have 4 of them. And then I'll add the rest of the actual text in a second here. I was going to build a structure first. The next piece is going to be another div. Whoops. I'm going to call this media, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to put a little comment to myself here, and media div. And then I'm going to have another div class, and I'll call this credits. And then I'll make a little note to myself, and credits div, so I can keep track of what's ending and what's opening. And then after that, I got a footer. Whoops. Spell footer. Okay. We've got, just to review, got an H1, got an H2, got a nav. The nav has an unordered list. There's 4 list items in there. And then we got 2 divs here, one called media, one called credits, and then a footer. And then in this media, there's going to be a YouTube embed. So I'm going to pull that code there in a second. But before I do that, we need divs to go inside the media div. So inside media div, I'm actually going to use section for each one because it's nice to use semantic HTML. I have 2 section divs here. This one will be called, let's give it an ID of trailer, and I'll explain why it's going to be trailer in a second. And I'll explain why it's ID in a second. This one is tickets, because here's the section for the trailer, it's a YouTube link, and then here's a section for buying tickets. So that's why I called it trailer. That's why I call it tickets. I'll use these IDs in a second. This is related to the navigation. So we'll be making internal links using these IDs. And then in this credits div, same situation. Section, closing tag for section, need another section. Whoops. This one will be called cast. This one down here in the second section will be called crew, and they correspond to these two pieces. So we're starting to build more stuff. Again, H1, H2, that corresponds to this H1 and this H2. Then we have a navigation with an unordered list and 4 list items, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we got a div with 2 smaller divs in it, which correspond to these two, or let's show the phone version, these two. And then we got another div called credits that has cast and crew. Here's cast and crew. If you imagine this is all one page. And I used ID because these will correspond to the links in this list of this navigation here. So how do you make a link from one part of your page to another part of your page? Well, we can use these IDs. So within this list item, we have a link, a equals a href equals # or hashtag or octothorpe. If you use the word trailer, and of course, we'll have to say watch trailer. This is the text we're going to be using. So now that we have that, we have it with hashtag or # trailer. If you click on this and you can see it's already a link, it'll go down to the section that's called trailer that has the ID trailer, and we'll do the same thing with tickets. Buy tickets. Closing a tag. Let's save this. So the idea is you click on this and it'll bring you down farther down the page or wherever in the page you are that has the trailer ID. Same thing with this tickets. You click on this link here, href hashtag tickets, then it'll take you to whatever ID of tickets is elsewhere in your page. So we're going to do the same thing for cast, main cast. I only did the main credited cast. Otherwise, there would be hundreds, maybe thousands of cast and crew, main crew. So as you can see in our preview, we've got an unordered list with bullet points. We're going to get rid of those bullet points in a minute. And then these are clickable links that will go down to sections elsewhere on the page. So these 4 here correspond to these 4 here. And then if you click on watch trailer, it'll scroll down to here. It's not going to go very far, but it'll go down to here. If you click on buy tickets, it'll go down to buy tickets. Same thing with cast and crew. And you can I'll show you this here. Let's take this back to, say, iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus. And if I scroll down, you can only see main cast. If I click on main cast, it'll bring you to the main cast part of the page. So that's how you can do internal links within your one single web page. And if you were to have a lot of content and you have to scroll and scroll and scroll, you can also make a link in the other direction and just make sure you use IDs and this hashtag, whoops, this whole kind of hashtag or pound sign thing. So the next pieces, we can go fill in the text, the code for the trailer. So that we can get from YouTube, and I've got it queued up right here. So if you go to YouTube, you want to embed a video in YouTube, you're going to click share. And then you want to click embed. And then you want this iframe with all this stuff. So they give you a nice little button to copy it. And then you can bring it into CodePen, whoops, CodePen over here in our trailer section. So paste it in right here. And then now it shows up in here, which is nice. They give you width and height off the top. I'm going to change these so that they fit better with what I want to do. So I'm going to change width 560, which is default, to 100%. And then I'm actually going to change this height to 500, just so I have two equal height things. So the next thing I want to do is in the ticket section, my ticket section has a picture and then some text over it. Instead of photoshopping text on top of it, I actually want a clickable link. And so to do that, we'll use a background image. And this you may recall from previous demos, but we're going to do it right here. So the next thing, now it doesn't look like much still, got to do some styling still, I haven't done any yet. In our ticket section, first thing we can add is the actual link. So I have here ahref. This link isn't going to go anywhere, so I can just put the pound sign. And then this one says buy tickets. So if you scroll down, you see the buy tickets thing here. Of course, this still doesn't look like much. We're going to start styling stuff in a second here. So the next thing I want to do is go into here in my CSS and add the CSS for the tickets. Let's get my notes here. Oh, before I do anything else in the CSS, we should do a CSS reset. The CSS reset again is the asterisk, which goes for everything in the web page. And then we want to do margin 0 and padding 0. So without that, you notice there was some default padding going on here. So now everything's off to the edge, off the edge, or on the edge. So we will start adding margin and padding as we need to override this. But first we have to reset things to 0 so that we can start fresh. See here, everything's edge to edge. This is only on the edge. You can't see the bullet points. They're off the screen, but we will take those bullet points off. So like I said, we're going to have a background image here for buy tickets. And so you can't just upload them to CodePen. You have to use a third-party service. So one recommendation is to use Imgur. If you haven't used Imgur before to host images for some reason, you don't have to use Imgur. You can use Google Drive or Dropbox or anything like that. You could use GitHub if you wanted, or Giphy if you're using a GIF. And so I've already added some pictures to this. So once you do that, if you click on one, then they give you a bunch of links that you can include. So I want the direct link. I want the actual photo. So once you've uploaded things to Imgur, IMGUR, then they'll give you all of this, and then you can just copy. And then we go, whoops, back to CodePen. And then I want the ticket section to have that picture as the background image. So in our CSS, if we're going to use ID, this is what we have here, then here we add the hashtag tickets. And then we can start to add our code for our background image. And so for our background image, background-image, URL, and then parentheses, and in the parentheses, the actual URL. And we've pasted it from, whoops, from Imgur, whoops, and then we can paste it right here. And so semicolon, and then if this works, then we should have a picture back here. Save. Did I not do this right? Where is it? What did I miss? Oh, I know what I missed. Tickets does not have a dimension, and so it doesn't know how big it's supposed to make itself. So we got to make a height, 500 pixels, and then the width is going to be 100%. Because our trailer is going to be height 500. I want to have the same height for both of those. So that's why I've had that there. So save this. And now here's our picture. And it may be hard to tell, but it starts to repeat because it's not quite the same size. If I move this out, you can really see this line. So we don't want that. We want background repeat, no repeat. And then we want our picture to look we want to be able to see the rest of the picture. And so we can do either background size contain. So the whole picture is contained here, but I actually don't like how that looks because it's not quite the right size. So I'm going to switch this to cover. So background size cover is what we had before, but when it shrinks, we can shrink this and then you can see more of it. That's a little more responsive than just having it locked in at a certain size. So this is actually a better outcome. So that's tickets. The next thing we want to do, since we're here, this is all the way in the corner. Don't want that. Want it in the center. And so first of all, we need to text align center this. So now it's at least in the center here. And we want it like in the actual center. And so the way to do this, it's not very obvious, but if we make the line height the same as the actual height of the div, then it'll center it. So our line height is 500 pixels. And so now it's in the center. Doesn't look like much still because we haven't put any font on it, but no matter where you go with this, no matter if you shrink it, it's always going to be in the center. So let's add some of the font and such, because we already put it in with Google. And so let's add some font stuff to this. if we go in our CSS, we can go into our body. We can add a font family. Actually, let's copy it from Google Fonts. So I want both of these going to be depending on which part of the code, which part of the page we're doing. If it's going to be doing these guys here, then we'll need Roboto. If we need these, it's going to be Squato 1. So we'll need both of these eventually, but I'm going to consider this as body text. And so we'll copy this one here. Font family Roboto, back to CodePen, and then we can paste it right into the body here. And so you can see it changed the font to Roboto. We're actually going to change this to Squato 1 later, but that's how you add font family, of course. And then the color of my text is this sort of dark yellow color. It's actually called goldenrod, so I thought I'd pick that. It was appropriate in honor of C3PO, goldenrod. And so it didn't change the color right here, but that's okay. Did change the color of these guys here to be goldenrod. So we're on our way. And while we're here in the body, if you notice, there's actually a little bit of a gradient from here to here. It's from here down to the footer. So we can do this in the body here. So this is actually background image, not background color. Linear gradient. And then we have to specify the two colors. So we start with black, comma, dark blue, semicolon. And so now it's hard to see because it's covered in picture and YouTube link, but if we squeeze this in, maybe we'll see it. We'll have to add more content to really see the background image, the background gradient. So you'll see this eventually once we add the cast and crew text. And while we're here, we got this here, we can start changing some of these fonts. These texts change their fonts. So I'll go here. H1. I'm going to go to Google Fonts, grab this font family here, and then into CodePen, font family, Squato 1. So change the font right here. That's good. And I'm actually going to bump up the size. Let's go to 3 Ms. So that looks good. And it already changed the color to goldenrod, so that's good. In the test site I made, I had color goldenrod, so it might be a good idea to change your color there. I can make this a clickable link also to go home. To do that, you can either add, you can add the A tag to this. So let's check my notes here real quick. Yeah. Ahref. Home. Whoops. So now this is a clickable link, and since it's a clickable link, it's now got the underline. We're going to get rid of that. And later on, we're going to use CSS to do a line break, depending on how we have set up our mockups. So I'll show you that in a second once we get into further down the line. So I want to make this line here in H2. Here, we've got to style that up a little bit. So H2. Also going to be Squad 01. So now that's Squad 01. And I want this font size to be 2M. So it maintains a hierarchy. So that's good there. And the next thing I want to do, maybe we style up these guys here, these navigation links. So if I go back here, I'm going to have multiple unordered lists. So I can't just use the unordered list. I should probably add a class here to my navigation for the unordered list. We can do it on the nav tag. So class, we'll call it navigation. And so I'll just make this a little bigger. So I'll go back to my CSS here, dot navigation, because this is a class, we need to use a dot to link them up from HTML to CSS. But if I were to add font family to this, it does change, that's good. But in order to style these, there's some other styling that we'll need to get more specific. So we can go UL and then LI. These are too small, so I'm going to make them font size 2.5M. And the reason I didn't make them just 2 is that I didn't want them to be separate from this H2 here. So that's why I did that. And right now, none of these are in the center. We'll have to change that. We can come back to this to make this all centered. Before we center anything, while we're at it, we need to add a little bit of code for our container div. So our container div, I'll start to put it right here. I like to order my CSS in the order that they show up in HTML. So this container div, that needs width 100 and margin 0 auto, which centers our container within the viewport. So you could have your container be a different width if you want space on the sides, but the way I have my phone orientation, pretty much width to width. And so I'm going to go with 100% there. Next thing we do is start cleaning up this stuff here. I want to make this here without a underline. So this is # home because it's an ID. We're using ID here. And then we want this to say text decoration none. And that should get rid of the underline. How to do that? Whoops, didn't do the underline. What am I missing? That's not it. What do I do? Oh, I know what it is. This needs to have an ID of home. And now our text decoration is gone. So I needed both this hashtag here and the ID to be there. Now we can start to center these here. And to do that, we'll need to work on each one. Container, yes. So center Empire Strikes Back and coming to theaters. We're gonna add another piece of code to the link here. So we can have an ID and a class. So we're gonna add a class here. We'll call this release. And we can do it for H2 as well. So class release. And so whatever code we put for release, whatever style we put for release, it'll apply in both of these cases here. So let's go down here, H2 dot release, because it's a class. Text align center. Oops. So now they're in the center, which is good. There's still no padding or margin, so it's right at the top of the edge here. And so I'm going to add some margin to the top. Let's give it 1M. And then I'm also gonna have some margin to the bottom, also 1M. And so now there is 1M of space in between here. Actually, there's 1M worth from here to here, and one here to here, and then here is also. So that's good there. Then we can center this navigation by going to down here. Let's start one just for navigation. Just we want to move that navigation to the center. Text align center. So now it's in the center, which is good. Needs a little bit of space in between the last link and the trailer, so we'll do margin bottom. Let's go 2M here. So now we got ourselves a little bit of space in between these links here and this trailer. This navigation here, it's still blue. It's still got the text underlined in there. So we can add some code to fix that up. And so because this style is associated with the links, we can't put it in LI here because these are things about A's. So we have to start another line here. Navigation ULLIA. So what this says is go to the navigation class, go to the UL, go to the LI, go to the A's. It has to be very specific in this case. That's why we write it this way. And in this navigation LI, we want text decoration none. That got rid of the underlines. And our color needs to change from blue to goldenrod. So we can add goldenrod. And now we have our text without the underline and then the right color. And in our mockup here, there's a little bit of space in between. So we can go back up to here, navigation ULLI, because now we're talking about the actual list item itself and the style that goes with that. And so we can add a little bit of extra padding there, or actually, we do want padding 0. Yeah. Either padding 0 or no padding at all. And eventually we want a width of 100%. That's so that in the case really of this, they don't bunch up together. We want them definitely bunched up at different screen sizes, but at our phone size, we want them to take up the entire width. Do this inspect. We want them to take up the entire width here, but in our other mockups, we want them to be side by side. So you can really use media queries, we'll get to that, and responsive web design to rearrange things. And so on an iPad, on a tablet, I want this kind of orientation, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second when we start to do our media queries. So what our default code will look like is this. Now, CodePen, you have to do this to show it in that orientation, but this is what mobile first is. We do it for this, and then we build different looks depending on the changing size of the device and browser. Okay, so now we can style this guy up here. So if you recall, this was in tickets, and that was here, this A here. And so we can make a tickets. We should do that anyway. Make a tickets, some code here. We already have some code here, right? So we have to style the A, this anchor, within the tickets section. So to do that, tickets, and then a space, and then A, so that it specifically targets the A that's within the tickets ID. So from there, I want this to be really big. So this font size, whoops, will be 4M. It's really big. And I want this font family to be Squad 01. So I'll just go back and copy it from there. Now we got in Squad 01. I'm going to take off this text decoration. So that is none. Next, I want to do the color. So goldenrod. Now, this picture right now, it's okay because it's well on white and it seems to be good contrast, but in different situations, you may not be able to see it so well. And so I wanted to do some text shadowing on this. So we can do a drop shadow. And the way to do that is text shadow. And then we can determine what the offsets are in pixels or ems. I'm just going to do pixels. So 2 pixels and 4 pixels. And then I don't want it to be goldenrod. I want it to be a different color. So I just picked light gray just to give it a little bit of definition. So it's, I think 2 in the X direction and Y in 2 in the X direction and 4 in the Y direction. So that's where we get this little drop shadow there. Save this. And so now my link is good. And of course, doesn't go anywhere because it's got this just pound sign here. So that part's done. So next we have to fill in the credits div, which has the cast and crew. And so I'm just going to copy it from the original here. Go to editor view just to save time. Here it is. I'm going to take this off here. Grab this unordered list, just to save myself some time. Here. And then this goes in the cast section. So if you recall in my mockup, there's a heading here. So we'll have to do that too and make this unordered list. So in the cast section, I'll paste. And I think I forgot to use the unordered list closing tag. So that'll go here. Whoops. And so let's check it out in. So not look like much here. Also have to add this heading. Let's go to do that. That goes before the unordered list. This is H2 main cast. H2. And so let's see what we have here. Right now, it looks like so much, doesn't look like much. So we have to add a little bit of code to this. So let's go into here. This section, let's scroll down to it. We're going to deal with this section here, ID cast, and then H2 here. So cast. First of all, we don't want no space in between the bottom of this picture and main cast. So we can add ourselves a little bit of margin. 4M's good. I like 4M for the bottom too also. And so we'll need to do a little more. Now we have a margin top here of 4M's and a margin bottom of 4M's down here. We can also write this using shorthand margin 4M on the top. So actually this actually gave us margin on all four sides, 4M on all four sides. 0 to the right, 4M to the bottom, and 0 to the left is the same as margin top 4M and margin bottom 4M. So clockwise from the top, right, bottom, left, or trouble. We also talked about it as trouble. So either way you write it, these are the two that are the same. So I will comment this out so you can see that this is trouble. Now, this H2 here, there's not a lot of space in between this and the next text underneath. So we can add cast H2. So it's targeting that H2 within the cast ID. And how much should I give it? Let's check. I give it like 1M underneath. So margin bottom 1M. Now that gave us a little bit of space that we needed there. Actually want this a little bit bigger also. So font size 4M. So I made it real big. And if you remember, our tickets link here was 4M. We didn't have a watch trailer one because it was the first thing. It's fine. And so that was 4M, and this is 4M. So what? Yes, font size 4M. So keep it consistent. That's why I wanted to do it that way. And we got to move all these guys into the center. So text align center. So that moved H2, just H2. So this unordered list we'll have to deal with separately, but now we've got this in proper position. All right, so now let's move these over and style them up properly. Now we can't just deal with them as the ID. We have to get more specific with these unordered lists. So we can say in the cast ID, just on those ULs, we'll do margin 0 auto to center the unordered list. Why did you center? Oh, we didn't center. It didn't center because it doesn't know what the width is to center on. So I just picked 75% here. So right now, this is not quite complete. So we have to do a little more. And it's not quite in the center yet. So we have to do a little bit more work on this. Also need to make this a little bigger. So to make them a little bigger, we have to focus on the list items itself. So ULLI, and then this font size, I wanted this 2M. That's more like it. And we do need to get rid of those. Oh no, my bad. We do want the bullet points, so that's good. So at the moment, it doesn't look centered like it's supposed to, like it does in the mockup, but We're going to do a little Flexbox things to make this more centered at the smaller sizes, but right now it's still in progress, our styling, so don't worry about this being in the center just yet. But at the moment, at the size, at these sizes, it's centered well. These sizes, they're not supposed to be centered on the page, just going to be side-by-side action. And so we'll use Flexbox for that. So right now it doesn't need to be centered like this. Really matters is here. So it's already centered, that's good. But we'll fix that coming up. So we can bring in now the crew stuff. So I'm going to copy it over from the original. So let's go back up here, editor view, take this off of responsive. I'm going to just scroll down, grab this unordered list, and then paste it into this guy over here. This is my crew section. I'm going to drop it in here. And I also have to add an H2 heading part here. This is H2 main crew. All right. So this is all good here. If you remember, this main cast section here looked just like this once upon a time, a few minutes ago. So we want to apply the same style to this as we did to this. And we could type out all these parts all over again, or we can save ourselves some time and code, which is going to be helpful if we have a lot of code. We can just append these, because we can do this with a comma and say both cast and crew should get a margin top of 4 and a margin bottom of 4 ems. Save this. Now it's got a 4em margin on both sides. Great. We do the same thing with this crew H2. It needs to be margin bottom of 1 and font size 4em and text align center. So we can add it to this crew H2. And now that looks proper, just like this one up here. And then our cast UL, same thing, comma, crew UL. That's good. So the point is that if you have more than one element or selector, or more than one ID or class that, or HTML tag that has the same style, you can double up by doing this comma thing that says cast UL and crew UL get margin 0 auto and width 75%. So we're almost finished here. Just to add comma to this crew, crew ULLI, and now proper size. So that's good. Now I promised you we would use Flexbox to make these side by side at the larger sizes. So right now, this is what it looks like for the more mobile configuration, which is good. But at the larger one, we're going to need some Flexbox and some media queries to set some things up. But you don't need any media queries yet until, let's see, let's check my notes, see if I was right. And I have everything needed. Oh, yes, not until the media queries we can use the display flexbox thing. So last thing we don't have is our footer. Our footer consists of this title again, or this is like an H2, and then more links, same as these links, but differently styled, and then the copyright thing over here. So we can add that to ours. So we go back up to here to our footer, and then our footer gets, let's check my notes again. Footer gets H2, whoops, the Empire Strikes Back. I had some extra text by me. And then we have a unordered list again. And then we have 4, whoops, list items, whoops. And I'm just going to copy and paste 3 more times. Good. Now, again, this was watch trailer. This was buy tickets. This was main cast, main crew. So some often in footers, the navigation is repeated, so they have another way to get to things. And of course, we want to make these clickable. So these are down here, not clickable yet. So we want to make, whoops, again, a href. And then because we have established these IDs that people will click to get to, we can use the # or hashtag convention there to make our links so that they actually go somewhere. These are called internal links or anchor links. So we can do that for all 4 since we established them already. Tickets. And the closing A tag goes here. Ahref cast. Oops. A href crew. A. And then at the bottom of the footer, we had copyright text. We can use a paragraph text for that. Copyright, whoops, copyright. And to make the little copyright symbol, in HTML, we can do this little thing where we use the ampersand symbol and the word copy, and it knows to make a copyright symbol. So here it is right there, really tiny. Let's say 1980 Lucasfilm Limited. Now we have our, whoops, our footer down here. Now you can barely see that, but now you can see that the gradient, the background gradient that we put in the a few minutes ago or a while ago, started from black and then it changed to a dark blue color. We have to change this text. This footer has a black background. We can change up this stuff next here. So footer, background color, black. So now we have a background color of black. And just check my notes here. This text needs to go into the center. Text align center. So that moved all of our text to the center. Good. And we could add margin, or we could add padding. Let's try padding. Let's see what that looks like. Padding top 2M. Whoops, 2M. So that's good. So we could add margin, but that would just move all of this black further away from this. So in order to give ourselves some space in between this H2 and the top of the footer, then we add some padding. And so we should do the same at the bottom. Yeah, we should add a little padding to the bottom. So padding bottom 1M. So it gave us a little bit, gave us a little bit of space at the very bottom. So again, we can also do a shorthand like this, which is the same. So this line is the same as these two lines. So if you're ever in a situation where you're writing a lot of code and need to save space, so it loads faster, any reduction is good, then you can do this shorthand: top, bottom, right, or top, right, bottom, left. So I will comment this out. Top, right, bottom, left. All right, that's our footer. Now, again, we need to do a little more specific code styling for these pieces here. So the next thing, footer, the unordered list. So we can separate the unordered list from the copyright symbol. So margin bottom, let's say 1M. So now that gives us some little space underneath the UL there. Now we could add a margin top to this as well, the space in between the heading and the unordered list. So we can do that. Which do I want? I want 1M. So you see that gave us some space in between here. Now I could do footer H2 margin bottom 1M and get the same result if I didn't have this margin top here. So either way, you put a margin in between the unordered list and the H2, either with a top or bottom, depending on which direction you're going. So let's just get rid of this. We need this. And then that's getting better. What else do we need to do? We'll need to change the color of the links and get rid of the underline, if you can see. So that situation is footer. And then I always like to go through the steps of, okay, it's footer, and then it's the unordered list, and then it's the list item, and then it's the A. That's very specific. And we don't want the text decoration. None. Got rid of the underline. And we want the color to be goldenrod, just like all the other links. It's good to have a consistent color for links. And if you still had bullet points here, then you can go to footer ULLI and do list, style type none. So you can't see them here, but if you had bullet points still, you can get rid of them with the list style type none. So you can also specify list style type of different shapes. You can have circles or squares and such. We don't want any, so we'll use list style type none. So we've built our site more or less, but now we want to do some different things depending on the size of the screen and all of that. So we're going to add some media queries and some other little things to customize each screen's experience. So right now, this looks decent at the mobile portrait configuration. So now we need to start building up the scenarios for other device and other orientations. And the way we do that, of course, is with media queries. So the next up from the portrait phone size, in the past, I've shown you media all. It's all sorts of style sheets, but we can just do screen. It's really dealing with screens. And here we have to decide at what point, at what device pixel width or what have you, do you want things to start to change? And so I want things to change at a minimum width of 480 pixels. Then we have the curly brackets, and then we'll start to add different HTML elements that we want to change around or move around here. And the reason we picked min width is that we're starting from here and then going to the next width up. So if we're going mobile first, then use to reach the next level, then that's a minimum width. If we were doing this conventionally desktop first, then we would use max widths. So it just depends on which direction you're going. For mobile first, we're going min width. So we're going up levels, and then we have to reach a minimum level for things to change. And this will be more apparent when we actually put them all in place and see how they react. I'm actually going to hold off on putting some things here based on other things. So let's come back to that later. We can also set up a media query for a media screen, and the next highest level is usually around 600 pixels. These are your portrait size tablets and larger phones. So at this level, what I want, actually going to skip this one also. Then the next level up, screen and min width of, this is usually 768 pixels, and these device breakpoints, these are breakpoints. You can look them up online. I can send them to you as well. Usually if you Google CSS breakpoints or media query breakpoints, you'll usually get like W3 schools or something like that showing up. So, and what this is going to tell the browser is that as long as the screen width is 768 pixels and above, then certain styles will be applied. So in the past, I think I've shown you like changing background colors depending on the size. And so that's the concept. So if a device is at a certain width, or say if you're on your laptop or something, and your screen browser is such that it's 768 or more, then it'll show this code right here. And it'll overrule whatever it has above it. So in my case, I want the, instead of the navigation items to be stacked vertically, I want them stacked horizontally. So that's navigation unordered list item. And I want those list items to be display block or inline block, that is. I want them to be inline, but also have block element styling to them. take this. And so I also want them to be a certain width, each of these list items. And so they weren't lining up because I didn't actually have a width on them for them to be in line. And so I also want to spread them out a little bit. So I want the padding on the top to be 0, but in between them, I want them a little more spaced out. And so I'll add half an M in between. So here, I didn't put padding left or right. I just put padding, and so, or top and bottom. And so here, this is for the top. This is for the right. And since I only have 2 values here, it goes back to the bottom here and then the left. So if I only put 2 numbers here, they're top, right, and then it starts over bottom, left. So at a minimum width of 768 pixels, I have my list items in a inline, and they also have inline block. They also have block capabilities, so they'll have a width and padding, so you can do that. And so if we were to shrink this down past 768 pixels, then it'll revert back to the stacked code that we have up here. So if I do this, whoops, stop. So back to our original size here for mobile phone portrait size. Here looks right, and then when we get bigger, it'll go bigger. Now they are lined up side by side, and we will get to this later, but you may have noticed that at a certain width, and we'll have to calculate which width this is. Here it is. This, I don't like how this looks compared to these. It should be consistent. And so depending on what the breakpoint that was, we'll have to calculate this using some tools that I can show you here in the inspector. We can determine at a certain width, then we will have all of them line up like this. So that's going to be another media query, and we'll show you how to figure that out. Here. Here it is. Okay. We also were going to stack these guys side by side at the wider widths, not make them like this. So I said we were going to do this with Flexbox. We could also do this with floating, but Flexbox is more reliable, and floating, you have to also do the clear thing, which gets complicated and there's a hack in it. And so let's just do this by Flexbox. And so if you remember, we have up here a div called media, which has 2 sections in it, a section called trailer and a section called tickets. And so in my mockup for the desktop, then these 2 were side by side. And also these two are side by side. And so using Flexbox, we can flex them so they're side by side and there's no floating and clearing business. Same thing for these two. So in our media query for anything bigger than 768, then we will add, that one was called media, so dot media. I want display flex. So this applies a display flex to that parent element, which is the media one, and then the children of that media will flex. And so by default, they will go side by side now. I have to do some extra stuff to make sure that they're not, so they're even. So I'm gonna add a little code later, but they are side by side now, like they're supposed to be. So that part was a win, but I have to do some resizing of this to make sure that they are flexed properly. But before I do that, while I'm here, what's also getting display flex is that second div with the cast and crew in it. This one's called credits. And so I can again combine them, credits. And so if I scroll into this preview section, now they are flexed together. No need for crazy floating and clearing and clear fixes and all that. So even though the sizes aren't right, we can fix that part of it, but they're side by side as they should. So let's see. So what we need to do to fix this so that's not squished in there, I actually have to add a width to this div here, which was trailer. So way back in the beginning here, I should have put it here before tickets. So whoops. Hashtag trailer and with 100%. So now it corrects itself and now it's halfway like it's supposed to be. And did I leave out anything else? I think that's it. Did I miss something here? Let's check here. So I just noticed that these are properly half and half, but these aren't half and half. And the reason why they're not is that I did not put a width on these two divs, this cast ID section, nor this crew section. And so back up in cast and crew here, cast comma crew, they should also have a width of 100%. Whoops. And so now they are evenly matched. They're match set, both half and half. So that's where I missed there. Sorry about that. Now let's save this and go back to our media query here. Let's see what else needs to be going there. Oh, so I had shown this on this one when they are in phone mode. there's actually a little bit of room in between the trailer and this picture here. And in order to do that, I had a margin in between here. So I'll show you what that looks like here. That margin came from, was, yes. So in the tickets one, I'd put, and it's probably easier to show you this way. Oops. Right now, no space in between. So I went to the tickets one here, tickets here, added a margin top of 2M so that at this size, there's a little bit of room. It's hard to see maybe because it's that dark blue, it's almost black, but there is space in between there. And that's all well and good, but the problem is once you go to the big size, oh, Flexbox fixed it. Oh, no, it didn't. The heights are now different. Same here now, but there's a little bit of space here. And so we don't want that. We don't want this extra space here. There's a margin being applied to it. So in our media query, we can override this by going to tickets here, starting a new one before the end, # tickets, curly brackets, and then margin top of 0. So at this bigger size, now they're even again. So if you have two things side by side and desktop, but in mobile, they're spaced out some, you have to override that spacing when you go to the big size. What else do we want to do? Our footer at a bigger size, I would actually like these guys to be here, these list items in the footer to be side by side. So we can go into our media query here. That one was footer, unordered list item. And we can do display inline block so that they line up like this. Now they're a little too close together for comfort. And so we can add padding again. And I'm going to shorthand this. So no padding top or bottom and just 1M left and right. So now they're spaced out a little bit better and you can actually read them as links. And I have one other thing. I had put, and I'll show you here, I'll do it in this one. I had made the cast and crew unordered lists with 50% and margin 0 auto just to, oops. Just not to have them so wide, a little more readable, squeezed in a little bit at that size. So I put that in the original, so I put that here. And so it's a couple more things to show you and then we're done. So at wide size, widest, super wide, this looks good. I like how that looks, but you remember in that sort of in between, did this kind of thing where it wasn't quite consistent. There are ways to specify this, and so the way to figure out where to make the breakpoint is we can do this in change view, go to full page view, and then inspect if you're in Chrome, and then switch this to, or actually, let's see if it does it here. Yep. So before you click the responsive button here, the toggle device toolbar, you can actually count it off by, you can see the numbers. So at a certain point, looks good here. Over 768 looks good, but at some point, it's not, the words aren't going to break quite right. 935, it's good. So by trial and error, I found that somewhere around here, it starts to get a little funky. So at 982, see, 981, 982, 981, 982. So at that point, I want to have a different width of them so that they all line up better. So I'll go close this, go back to, whoops, change view back to editor view. And I'm going to add one last media query. So after all of these, one last media query, media, screen, and min width 981 pixels. Then we're going to have a certain kind of code. Now your situation may be different, and so that's why you can use that counter in Google to figure out what exactly is the breakpoint, because everyone's content is different and everyone's content is going to act differently when you move them in and out and make the screen sizes wider and smaller and thinner. So that'll be a trial and error process for you too. So I want to make that navigation ULLI. I want to change the width to 20%. Actually, it spaces out a little more here. And then when we get to that, let's see, this situation at the 981 point, which we're not showing at the moment, but at a certain point, it'll go to here and that looks nice. So you may have to experiment with how much width you give them here at this situation before you get something that looks like this. So starts out phone size, portrait size, or even landscape like this. But as you get bigger, it goes side by side, and so do these two pieces and these two pieces. And then you link 2 words for each of them, and they're stacked because the widths are just so much. And then as you spread them out, they go onto one line and they also maintain a certain width. And you can find this out, what exactly they are, in your inspector. So inspect, and then you can use this guy to check just how wide they are. So there's actually one last thing I did in mine. So when it's like this, that looks good. But if I were to inspect this, and test this out on different devices. So let's call this, let's go with iPhone 5, iPhone 6. I may want to have this break differently. Maybe I want to say the Empire on one line and Strikes Back on the next line. We can actually do this with a little bit of CSS. So maybe I want it to break at the, where's this? At the, oh, either this want to break a certain way, or maybe I want this to break at coming to theaters right here. And so May 21, 1980 are all going to be on the same line. And so what we can do is, last thing I'll show you, click this, go back to our editor. All right, last thing. We can use the span tag, HTML tag, to insert or get within some code in our HTML to have a specific piece of code for just part of it. And so in this case, I'm going to do it on the coming to theaters part. And so we can do a span. So I want it to break after theaters, before the word May here. So what I'll add is span. And then I'll add a class to it called break. And then I'm going to add a break HTML tag there, and then I'm going to close this span tag. So what it'll do, it'll add a break point to this, a line break, that is, in between coming to theaters May 21st, 1980. Now, it shows up right at the moment here at the wide screen, but maybe I don't want it to show up then. So I only want it to show up in these smaller sizes where it will look better when it's a smaller screen. So right now it's showing up. And so I don't want it to show up at this size. So we go back to our media query. Actually, this is the one for min width 480. And so since we have a break class here, we'll do break. And then display none. So now we don't see that break anymore because we're on a screen, our minimum width is 480, and we don't see this line break anymore. But if we, let's save this, if we squeeze this in, actually, let's do this in the full page view with our responsive inspector. You see it here. We change the orientation, and then the line break goes away. Make this bigger even more. We can even use, if we change, just to change the size of the screen, if we go all the way down to 480. Whoop, I missed it too far. Went too fast. We're at 472, 473, and at 480, you can just see the break happen. So that's a way to make specific line breaks in your code using spans and breaks, line breaks. So that is my website for project 2. All right. Anyone has any questions about all of this, feel free to reach out, and good luck with your coding.